Hey guys, it's Kevin review for F9 The Fast Saga. So what F9 is essentially about is basically once again we center on Dominic Toretto, and he is at a point where he kind of wants to leave this more criminal life behind him. He's settled down with a family, but he is pulled back in through his usual crew that basically tells him that there is a new terrorist threat out there that turns out to actually be Dom's long-lost brother, who we've never heard about until now, and basically they need to do what they can to try to stop him, but also stop Cypher, who is working very closely with him and hopefully, save the day once again. So F9 The Fast Saga, I was definitely looking forward to this movie. Now, look, let me give you guys some context. The Fast and Furious franchise overall is one that, I've talked about Furious 7 and Fate of the Furious, but I've actually never seen any of the other ones until now. Obviously, I watched Hobbs and Shaw, but I'm talking about, the main series. I have not watched any of the other films until now, so before this film, I went and watched the entire franchise, and I have to say, I can't exactly say I'm a fan of this franchise anymore. I like 3 of the films. I think the first 4 are really rocky. You could tell that they were trying to do, they were really just kind of like generic street racing films. There wasn't anything that special to them. But once you get to the 4th film, you can get the sense that they're trying to do something different, and I don't think it fully kicked in until Fast 5, which is just one of the best, comebacks out of any franchise there is. I mean, that is a film that is so well done in terms of spectacle, in terms of action, but also really gives you a chance to actually care about these characters and placing them in this scenario that is actually really interesting to watch, and then I think that momentum continues with Fast and Furious 6, which is actually my favorite of the entire franchise, because not only do you have some really great action sequences, but you also have a really great villain to oppose them, and there's a lot of great emotion in that film. And then Furious 7, for me, is where this franchise should have ended. I think that it was a really good way to wrap things up. It can be a little overstuffed at times. I don't like it quite as much as I used to back when I reviewed it in 2015, which that review's fun to watch because I make it seem like I'm a fan of this franchise when at the time that was the only film I had seen in full. But anyway, yeah, that film I do think though was a satisfying way to close out the Paul Walker legacy and things like that, and I really do think should have been the end, but for some reason, these have continued. We had Fate of the Furious, which I liked at first, but on a rewatch, it just feels kind of unnecessary, and really them just kind of grasping at straws to come up with something interesting. The idea of Dom turning rogue just doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it just wasn't a very good installment in the franchise. It feels kind of throwaway at points, and really the only thing I think that film did well is set up the conflict between Hobbs and Shaw, which is in a completely different film, and now they're completely removed from the franchise. They're not in here anymore. So now we get to F9, and really, I was just hoping that this film could be a lot of fun. They were really, bringing everyone back. It seemed like they were going all out in terms of action. And while I was expecting this to be a really fun film because the franchise up to this point, even the ones I don't like, have been fun, there was still that doubt with some of the things that they were hinting at in this film that maybe they're starting to push that ridiculousness a little bit too far. Maybe it's getting to the point where they just don't really know what to do with it anymore. And here's the thing, all of these films that we're talking about, I don't hate. There are aspects of each of them that I really do like, and there are sequences that I really do like, and so I like what they overall are going for, and there's never been a film that they've made that I've absolutely despised. And unfortunately, that changes now. F9 is a film that wants to do a lot, it wants to accomplish a lot, but so little of it, it actually ends up succeeding at doing. I mean, this is such a disastrous film that I think really brings this franchise to a new low in ways that I didn't even think were really possible. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we are just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And getting right to the acting, I think that for me really sums up the problem with this franchise because, yeah, this is a talented cast. You know, a lot of them are very entertaining to watch. They've been great in other films. But here, I mean, there's a lot of talent in here, but I feel like a lot of it is very much wasted in this film. Let's talk about Vin Diesel, though, because, look, he's an actor that is very entertaining. He's a lot of fun to watch, but I wouldn't really say he is this amazing actor that has these wide range of emotions, but he seems to think that he is, because he is taking this film so seriously to the point of ridiculousness, and you have a very hard time, you know, really latching onto this performance. This performance overall, it just sticks out like a sore thumb with how seriously he really is trying to take this material. And again, I appreciate the fact that he, you know, really wants to, you know, dive deep into Dominic Toretto overall, but I just don't think Diesel at this point has that emotional range other than, oh, I'm Vin Diesel, I talk like this, and then sometimes I get really angry. Like, that's how he is in these films, and there just isn't much else in terms of emotion. I like the passion that's there, but overall, I felt like it was clashing with the rest of the film because nobody else acting-wise is really on that level. John Cena, let's talk about him. He, of course, is Dom's twin brother, and he kind of sucks here. He kind of does. I was hoping that he would be a fun addition to the franchise. I feel like recently the franchise has done a really good job of taking like a big name actor and really giving them a fun purpose in this series, and I don't feel like that's the case with John Cena at all. I think he kind of sucks here. The character of Jacob, you know, he's one that is supposed to hold all this resentment towards Dom. You're supposed to understand why he's gone in this evil direction, and you just don't buy it for a second. I didn't buy that Cena was this like really evil and vindictive character. It just really fell flat for me, and I thought he was severely miscast here overall. I really did not like what he ended up doing in this film, and I think he definitely is one of the biggest problems with it for sure. I understand they're trying to do something a little different with his character, but overall, I was not a fan of his performance very much at all here. Now, as far as the rest of the cast goes, look, they're very talented. There's a lot of good actors that are in here. Michelle Rodriguez, I usually really do like as Letty. I think she still does a pretty good job in this film. Tyrese, Gibson, Ludacris, always fun. They always have a fun back and forth here, and I always enjoy, you know, what they end up doing, and I really did like their dynamic here. Nathalie Emmanuel gets a little bit more to do in this film than others, and I think she does overall stick out, and I think she did give a fun performance here, but the majority of these actors, their talents are kind of wasted. I didn't really feel like there was as many standouts in this film as some of the other ones, and overall, there's a lot of problems with this film, but I wouldn't necessarily say, besides Diesel and Cena, that the acting is really one of them overall. But now we got to get to the thing that I think really does bring this film down, which surprisingly is the directing, which this is what shocks me. Justin Lin is really, I think, the guy that the franchise is kind of his baby. Like, he's the one who brought this franchise back from the ashes. He revitalized this franchise. He took it from this sort of generic street racing franchise that takes itself way too seriously to something that's a lot more fun and more of like a fun buddy heist film. And I think the franchise has really kind of been hitting its stride since then. And so having him come back should be, you know, a step in the right direction, correct? Well, here's the thing. I feel like Lin came back as a director and wasn't really given the chance to showcase his true vision, because I didn't really feel like this film had that same sort of feel that Fast 5 did, that Fast and Furious 6 did. I didn't really feel that from this movie, and I don't think that it's to say his directing was like, you know, lazy. I think he definitely did try with this movie, but it felt like he was almost sort of pigeonholed to just do one specific type of thing where, you know, he's constructing these very ridiculous and over-the-top action sequences, but you know, his knack for, I think, you know, thrilling moments, his knack for making things generally suspenseful, I just didn't feel it in this movie. I think that his directing, again, it's good to see him come back, but I think that his directing just didn't really work here overall, and I think that was definitely disappointing, but I think what really holds the film back is the screenplay, which, holy shit, I mean, this film is awful in terms of writing. There is so much here that I could not stand about this movie. There's so much here that I was honestly baffled went in the direction that it did. I mean, look, the story alone is ridiculous. The idea that Dom suddenly has this evil brother that we've never heard about before feels like something that you come up with in a focus group. It legitimately feels like you had a bunch of people sitting around trying to figure out what else can we do that we haven't done before. You know, this franchise, we've done basically everything you could think of. What else can we really do? And someone came up with this as at a pitch meeting, and for some reason, this is the plot of the movie. And I gotta say, in the film, it's about as dumb as it sounds like. But the biggest issue I would say with the film is not just the plot itself, it's the way in which it unfolds. Because it is clear to me that the biggest issue with this franchise right now is actually the fact that it's kind of at odds with itself. I think this film in general has a huge identity crisis because half of it wants to be this ridiculous and stupid action film, which, I mean, we'll get to that in a little bit, but like, they really go all out in terms of that, and that's fine. But the problem is, this film isn't just that way. This film isn't just trying to be nonsensical. This film isn't just trying to be ridiculous. It's not just trying to be this absurd action film that, you know, lacks any basic logic whatsoever and has moments that are just gonna, you know, and has so many moments that just don't make any sense. These death-defying moments, you know, yes, that's in the film, but it also is trying to be this, like, really sort of serious and at points artsy film about regrets and about Dom's, like, legacy and things like that, and it just does not really work at all, and Jacob as a character really falls flat. The film really wants to try to get you to care about the bond between these two, but also see what broke them, and it just does not work at all, and again, it's because the film is taking itself so seriously to the point where it feels corny. It really doesn't work anymore, and I think what really is hurting it, and the fact that it just feels so ingenuine, is that, you know, in the previous films, the emotion was there. The emotion wasn't there, though, because, oh, the writing was better. It was because of what the film was focusing on, which, at the end of the day, these films are about the friendship between Dom and Brian. That's always been, like, I think the main sort of, you know, the main heart of this of these films is that genuine friendship that these two have. You care about it, it feels real, you feel real chemistry from the two actors, and it just felt very natural in that way. Now, however, Paul Walker obviously is no longer with us, and that's not something that they could have avoided. That's not their fault or anything, but it feels like since then they have been trying to do everything they can to replicate that heart, to replicate what we got in those films, and it just doesn't work anymore. It feels so forced with what is trying to happen. Writing in this film, you know, these are not the usual people that write the Fast and Furious movies. Chris Morgan, who usually does the screenplay, he's not here, and I think it's very noticeable that he's not here because the film just feels very off overall. It feels tonally unbalanced. I mean, like I said, a bunch of this film is trying to be this really serious film about this rivalry between brothers and what this means to Dom, and maybe the effect that, you know, his father and him, you know, the whole everything that went down with his father, is he gonna have the same effect on his kid? And it's just like, I frankly don't give a shit. Like, none of this is that deep, and none of this is that compelling, but the film acts like it is. The film acts like Jacob is the biggest threat that they've ever had, and you never once feel his presence. It just doesn't really work in this movie. And the film's villains, here's the thing. Like I said before, I do think there have been good villains in this franchise, but the reasons that those villains have worked is because the film actually gives them time to be villainous, but also for you to sort of understand their point of view. When it came down to Shaw, you know, his character, not Jason Statham, but the other Shaw, Owen Shaw, you felt his presence because it felt like he was really the thing that was trying to drive a rift between everyone. He was trying to get all these characters to, you know, question their morality and things like that, and it really did work as such. Whereas here, it just feels forced, and I don't think they did a very good job with it. So yeah, I think that part of the movie, it just never really quite worked for me in the way that I wanted it to. There is one scene especially in this movie that really highlights the problem. It involves this sort of epiphany that Dom has, and I was legitimately so confused by what they were doing. I don't know what they were going for with this scene. But it felt like something out of like some art house film. It was so weird what they decided to do, and I just don't see what role it's supposed to play in this movie. Like, what is the point of this overall? It just felt random, and I didn't like anything about it. So like, stuff like that, you could cut out of this movie entirely, and I don't really know what they were trying to go for there overall. It just felt like something that like Vin Diesel was pushing, because he really wanted to do something different. He wanted to do something really profound and emotional, but forgetting that this is just supposed to be just like a fun action romp and not much else. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say that the balance, it just isn't there at all. It feels like two distinctly different movies, and neither of them are really accomplishing what I want them to overall. But the problem is the other half of this film might be even worse, and a bigger pressing issue is that while one half of this film is trying to be something that's like really overly serious, the other half is trying to be the most nonsensical thing ever, to the point where it feels like self-parody, because the other half of this film is trying to get into the idea that maybe these characters are superheroes. They faced all these odds, there's so much that they've overcome, maybe suddenly they are, you know, these like powerful superhumans. And here is my problem with that. I know a lot of people have, you know, made fun of others that say, oh, they're taking things too far. How is this going too far when they've done this in other films? That's not the issue I have. I don't have the issue with them pushing the franchise further and further. I don't have the issue with that. But when you start to bring up the idea that your characters are essentially invincible and nothing is actually going to hurt them, there's not going to be any obstacles that get in their way, they'll just be able to overcome it, suddenly any sense of stakes, any sort of suspense is completely removed from the franchise. And that was my biggest problem with this entire film, is that because they kept bringing up these ideas, I actually think it hurts a lot of the story, because again, they're trying to make this feel like a big deal, but it actually feels very inconsequential. It doesn't help that there's a good portion of this movie that just kind of feels like a setup for the final two films in this franchise. So in general, you have a script that, while it's trying to be bigger, it honestly feels like maybe the most unnecessary and inconsequential entry yet, because there isn't a lot that happens in this film that really takes these characters anywhere. There isn't really a lot that happens here, and the other thing that's annoying about it is that this is the first film in the Fast and Furious, but this is probably the most characters that have ever been in a Fast and Furious film. Like, this really does feel like the Avengers of the Fast and Furious, where everyone's now coming together. And almost all of them are completely wasted here. Let's talk about Georgiana Brewster's character. I have not brought her up much, but Mia does come back in this film, and that's a fine idea. You know, it makes sense, obviously. She is Dom's sister, you know, with his brother having a big role in the story. It makes sense for her to come back. And what do they do with her? Well, she has like one scene with Letty where they sort of like talk things out, and she's kind of there in the background. She's helping them on this mission, and that's it. There's nothing for her to do in this movie. I can't even think of a scene that she shared with Jacob. It's almost like they didn't really know what to do with her. They knew that they needed to bring her back, but they had no idea what role she was actually going to play in this film, and that really frustrated me because I really do like the Mia character. I think she's a character that does add a lot of heart, that could have added something genuine to this film, but they didn't do jack shit with her, and I was really disappointed overall. So yeah, I think that was a character that was completely wasted. Other actors that maybe you're looking forward to in this movie. You know, you've seen Charlize Theron on the posters. You're wondering what Cypher is going to do. I know a lot of people are not big fans of her in Fate of the Furious, but she's back here. She's going to make a grand return. What does she do? She spends the majority of this movie in what is essentially a box. Literally. She's stuck in a box, like trapped from doing any sort of evil shit that she was doing, and it feels like she's only there because they could only use Charlize Theron for so long. Like, I don't know if this was the case, but it generally feels like they were only able to get a little, you know, Charlize Theron like signed her contract to come back for this movie, and she couldn't be on for that long. She was like, all right, I need to have only like 10 minutes of screen time, and that's it. And so they did what they could to use her very little, and that's all you get of her character. She has absolutely nothing to do in this movie, and then suddenly they start to do more with her, and it just feels too late. It feels, again, like they are just trying so hard to give her something to do to make up for lost time, and it's like, I don't care anymore. Like, there's no reason to be giving this character all of this focus when she's basically just been shoved to the background for the majority of the film. So no, I did not like what they did there. Helen Mirren is also in this movie, but honestly, everything you've seen in the commercial, that's all she has to do. She's there to get Dom to like test out some car, and that's it. There's no reason for her to be here except for the fact that they are trying so hard to set up the next two movies in this franchise, and there's so much that happens in this film that really just doesn't really need to be here. It just feels like such a clusterfuck overall. Not to mention, there's so much that happens in this movie that feels more like a joke. Something that I was not looking forward to was the idea that Han's alive. One, this is something they should have never spoiled in the trailer because it takes a long time for him to come back in the movie. Two, just the idea of it, I think, is really dumb. I feel like when people have said justice for Han, they were never actually serious about it. It was just kind of something that people did as like a joke, you know, something to like gain clout or something like that. Nobody actually wanted this justice. Nobody actually wanted to see that play out because honestly, Han's death in the Fast and Furious franchise feels satisfying. You know, we saw it happen in Tokyo Drift. We didn't know what was going on. They take the next few films to sort of set it up, and it's a really good moment because now you have context to what actually happened there. And sure, maybe they kind of skip over his death in Furious 7. That's one of my flaws with that movie, is that I don't think they give Han a good enough send-off overall. But I mean, with the way they bring him back in this movie, it honestly feels like maybe he should have just never died. Maybe they should have never done anything with him, because the way that they try to explain it is one of the dumbest fucking things I have seen a franchise do in a long time. They are so desperate to try to eliminate any sort, and They are so desperate to try to convince you that this could happen. They are so desperate to convince you that, oh yeah, that you wanted him back. This is what you'll get now. And it just felt so forced in that way. I couldn't believe what they were doing when it came to Han's death. The way they completely just erased his death. It's just so dumb what they decided to do here. And I couldn't believe that this was the direction they took the franchise in. So between this and then the thing that you've seen in the trailer that people have also joked about, plays almost no role in this movie whatsoever. It happens at the end of the film. I'm not going to spoil what it is because I've seen a lot of people try to skirt away from it. It's dumb as fuck. It really is just dumb as fuck, and there really is no reason for it to be here other than, again, it feels like a meme. It feels like something that they did because others wanted them to do it as a joke. But I don't think anyone was actually serious about it, but they thought they were. And now we have them, you know, doing this thing that I truly didn't think would ever actually happen, but it is. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say that this film feels like it's catering to the audience too much, to where it's taking things that the audience jokingly said that they wanted and trying to actually pull it off. And seeing them do it, it's really dumb. And I think it also, again, goes back to my problem of those stakes are completely removed here. They take any opportunity to try to erase any sense of emotional stakes, any sense that maybe these characters aren't going to get out of this. You never get the sense that these characters are in any real danger. And it doesn't help that there's a whole subplot in this movie with Roman and Tej where basically he's trying to convince everyone that they are superhumans. And I like the Roman character a lot, but when he's basically just used as when he's basically just used as a vessel to try to convince everyone that we are these superhumans, it just doesn't really work anymore. And I think that really does bring the movie down overall, and it just really pissed me off. I really just could not stand so much of the screenplay. Like I said, it's incredibly disjointed. There's so many things that they're trying to do, but very little of it actually does work, and it just makes for such a frustrating screenplay at points, such a frustrating screenplay throughout this entire film. The dialogue as well is truly awful. There are so many moments when I was watching this movie and I couldn't believe what these characters were actually saying. And there's a lot of things here that normally work for me in this franchise. A big example of that is the character of Roman. I normally love this guy. He is easily the funniest character, I think, in this whole franchise. There are so many moments between him and the character of Tej. I love their banter overall. Literally, they could make a whole movie just of those two going back and forth, and I would be loving every second of it. The problem is here, his character, I feel like, is kind of misused because he really is just here to bring up the possibility that maybe these characters are invincible and have Tej debate him with that. Almost, but you can tell that they're trying to make it so it's like he's the audience and Tej is the other half of the audience. It's like, oh no, that's not what's going on. And it just feels so forced. And I've seen people say, oh, this is supposed to be more self-aware and things like that. And I just found it obnoxious. I felt like the self-awareness was just a way to cover up the fact that this is kind of stupid and that they don't really care much of what's going on in this story anymore. And again, it really does show. So no, I did not really like what they ended up doing. I thought that it was a really dumb move, and I just was not a huge fan of what they ended up doing overall. But these melodramatic flashback sequences that we're constantly cutting back to as well, that really doesn't help the movie either. It doesn't give you any reason to care about the story between Dom and Jacob. It wants to. It really wants to do what it can to get you to understand why Jacob's going to go dark, why these two went their separate ways, you know, what's really troubling Dom. But all of it just feels so forced. And like I said, it is clashing with what is trying to be such a ridiculous and silly film that it just is so annoying to watch. And the film also, like I said, has no sense of consequence throughout it. It doesn't feel like anything these characters are doing is leading to anything interesting. Instead, it just kind of feels like we're watching these characters do the same thing again, kind of contemplate the idea that nothing they're doing is actually going to affect them. And so it just makes this film painfully dull to watch. There were so many scenes where I'm like, I should be into this. I should really be locked into what they're doing, but I wasn't. I found myself so bored by so much of what was going on throughout this movie. Getting to the action sequences in this film, look, I already touched upon the fact that this franchise is on another level when it comes to the stupidity. I mean, any sense of, something that keeps the film a little bit grounded, it's gone. I mean, they don't even try to, make this feel somewhat organic, make this feel somewhat realistic. It's just completely over the top now, and I wouldn't have a problem with that if, again, I cared about the story, if I cared about these characters, but because of the fact that I wasn't really into this at all, I started to notice a lot more things that I probably wouldn't have. There's so many moments in this film where characters should very obviously die, and they don't. And look, maybe it's just because this one really was bothering me, but there's a moment very early on in this film where something happens to a character, and I'm like, oh my god, they actually went for this, and then they recover from it almost instantly. Nothing bad happens. They just are able to overcome it. Vehicles, these characters can just kind of lift at ease. Cars kind of just fall onto them, and they're just kind of fine after that. There's so many things in this film, and I get it that this franchise has always lacked physics. I'm not asking for it to do something that feels so organic and realistic, but I just want some sense of care, and when there's no emotional stakes already, having these action sequences that are so over the top and cheesy, it just doesn't really work at all, and I couldn't stand a lot of the action in this movie. There are some okay action sequences, you get the sense that Justin Lin still can construct action very well, but again, I felt like because this film was trying so hard to just push it as far as it possibly could, it just wasn't really working for me overall, and I think that's what really brought this film down. The score is fine, I guess. These films have never really been known for their score, and Brian Tyler has always done a good job when it comes to the score, and his score here is not terrible or anything like that. And the editing, oh my god, this is the longest film yet in the Fast and Furious franchise, and it very much does not need to be. I think there's a lot of things here that there's a lot of scenes that very much could have been trimmed. There's a lot of things that could have been cut out entirely or just waited for until the next movie. Guys, F9 is truly an awful experience. There are a lot of ideas in this movie that I get they wanted to go for, but it removes any sense of emotional stakes. It removes any sense of care, and as a result, it gives me a reason not to care either. I've gotten this sense when watching these last two films, but after this film, it is readily apparent to me that this franchise is just very much running out of steam. They really do not have any idea of what they want to do anymore. There really isn't much left that this franchise has to offer, and overall, I think it very much should have ended a while ago. Instead, what we're given here is a film that half of it feels like it's trying to be this very gritty and overly emotional, sort of spin-off of Dom Toretto's character, but then you have another half that feels almost like it's diverted into self-parody, and neither half of the movie, it seems to execute all that well. It has a cast that, some of which is having a lot of fun, but feels like they aren't really given much to do. Feels like they don't really play as big of a role as they really could have, and other actors that feel completely misused or completely underutilized, and overall is just a film that I wanted so much more from. That's the thing. I think there's so much more that this film could have done. I think they really could have pushed it further in terms of what they were doing, but it just felt like there was such a clash of ideas going on in this movie. And so as a result, we just have what is just such a messy and often absurdly boring film that really did not do much of anything for me. There's a lot that this film wants to do, but it does so much that it bites off more than it can chew overall, and at points it feels entirely inconsequential, and especially by the time the movie ends, it really just kind of feels like setup for these next two movies, in which I'm not very confident they're going to be great either. If this is what we're going to get moving forward, with these ideas that feel so half-assed, but also feel more like focus group meetings than an actual good story, and characters that are invincible and are almost superheroes, I'm not really interested in this anymore. I like the fact that Justin Lin is back, but this film for me went completely off the rails and might have ruined this entire franchise. It's without a doubt the worst film within the Fast and Furious franchise so far, and I am going to give F9 overall a D. Guys, I really do want to like these movies. I do. And I was hoping that this film, maybe could surprise me. It wasn't as bad as others were saying, but truly, I mean, this film annoyed me to no end, and I couldn't believe so many of the directions that they ended up doing here. I think these films could be really fun, but they really just need to pick a lane and stick to it, and it feels like that's what's really bringing this down overall. But other than that, guys, this is my review of F9 The Fast Saga. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.